I think a lot of people do write what they know and their kind of lived experience, which is a great thing. But the advice that I'd give is to write something that you want to write, that showcases your voice, rather than if people are saying, oh, everyone wants the next Game of Thrones. Don't try and write the next Game of Thrones. Write what you really care about, and that will show on the page. And honestly, the odds are it's never going to be made, but it will open up, if it's good and kind of authentic, it will open up a lot of doors and avenues for you. I didn't know I wanted to be a writer, actually. When I was kind of very young, I did a lot of acting for television, and I got to the age of 18 and people stopped employing me because I think when you're 13, 14, 15 and you're a boy and you're okay, there's a lot of opportunities. So I kind of hit a crossroads, and I went to university and read history and politics, got a job as a corporate lawyer, and then kind of had a moment of, I don't want to be a corporate lawyer, what am I doing? And I wrote a script about someone kind of at that fork in the road. Do they choose to be an actor, or do they choose to be a corporate lawyer? And it was kind of based on a group of friends, coming of age story in London. And I sent it to Nicola Schindler, amazing producer who I'd worked with 10 years, not quite 10 years, a few years earlier as an actor. She read it and said, this is great, I'd love to make it. It never got made, but it actually became an episode, or the kind of premise became the episode of Banana that I did for her and Russell T Davies many years later. But that gave me the courage to go, I'm not going to be a corporate lawyer, and I'm going to pursue writing. Having turned down the corporate law job, I kind of did odd jobs in London for basically 2 years as I was kind of writing the whole time. During that time, I'd managed to get myself an agent. I had applied for the BBC Writers Academy that first year, and I had gotten down to the workshop stage, and I didn't get further, and they said, come back next year, which I thought is just what people say, you know, sorry, come back next year. And I did, and in that year I'd kind of learned a lot. I'd kind of been on general meetings, I'd been developing bits and pieces, and I got through to the Writers Academy, I think in 2010, and that was at the time kind of 3 months workshopping with John York, and then onto the shows EastEnders, Casualty, Holby, and Sink or Swim. I think working on continuing drama is the best experience a writer can get, because it is a machine, and the machine is going to move with or without you. And it gives a writer, I think, such discipline in their writing, because the script has to be delivered by Thursday at 5, because the casting need it, production need it, and if you aren't able to keep up, then someone else is going to do it. And so I think it's just such an incredible training ground to get you in the discipline of storytelling and writing. And those shows, especially a show like EastEnders, you know, 3-4 times a week, it's story. So you have to be really good at story. So if I'm working with another writer or a script editor or a producer who I know has worked on continuing drama, I breathe a kind of almost sigh of relief, because they know how to talk about story. I think your voice has to come across in continuing drama. I think one of the real challenges is, for example, writing an episode of EastEnders, that is an episode of EastEnders, but making it your own. So a game that I used to play and a lot of other people play, because at the end of EastEnders there's obviously that iconic written by credit. If I can watch the first 5-10 minutes of EastEnders and I know who it's written by, I know it's a good episode. And, you know, Darren Little's episodes are so specific, and that's the skill, to write an episode of Casualty, an episode of EastEnders, but make it your episode of EastEnders or Casualty. And if you can do that, then you're winning. So I had always wanted to work in America as that kind of, you know, Hollywood law. And I moved over. I had a script at the BBC that didn't get made, but it opened a lot of doors and it got me an agent in the US. And I remember kind of flying out and just saying, I just want to work in America. And so it all happened very quickly. One of my kind of first times there, I did a kind of round of general meetings, and rather than just go and shake people's hands and say hello, I said, hello, and I've got this idea. And it became a weird bidding war, and it eventually sold to Warner Brothers and a production company called Belanti. And they said, well, while you're developing that, we are making a big show, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, for Netflix. You should meet the showrunner. And I did, and I flew back to the UK, got the job on the Thursday, started on the Monday. And so it was all mad and quick, but a brilliant kind of learning experience. The writer's room on Sabrina and Netflix was, I think there were 12 writers. So probably about 13 or 14 people sat around a huge table. We were at the top of the CNN tower in Hollywood, so literally overlooking the Hollywood sign. So it was all, you know, a bit mad. But the biggest culture shock for me was it's called a writer's room, but there's not much writing that happens in a writer's room. It is all about pitching, and that is a completely different skill. You can be an incredible writer, but you might not be able to pitch. Or you can be a great pitcher and not be able to write, but it's a completely different skill set, and it took me about 6 months to kind of catch up with that. And it was a kind of steep learning curve. What I kind of held on to is we were doing mini writers' rooms in Casualty. The way that story is talked about in a 14-person Netflix writers' room is no different to the way stories talked about on an episode of Casualty. The only difference is money. They can afford to put 14 people in a room for a year, and we can talk about one episode for 3 weeks. In Casualty, we had a morning because of the money. That's the only difference. On Sabrina, the showrunner kind of sits at the end of the table, and it's kind of hashing out stories, hashing out characters. And one of the biggest things I learned was how they break down a series. You know, so I think we spent the first 2 weeks just very generally talking about character and story. And then on the board, you'd kind of put up the first 12 episodes, and then you'd break it down by character. So in episode 1, for example, we knew Sabrina was going to do this roughly. In 2, we knew she was going to do that. And by the time you've done that for every character, when you look at the board, you've got a shape for an entire series. And again, that's just you have the time to do that. And then you go into breaking individual episodes, and you might spend 2 or 3 weeks just beating out individual episodes. And one of the hardest jobs, I think, in the writer's room is the writer's assistant, whose job is to type pretty much verbatim everything that is said during the entire day. I pee a lot, so I could never do that job. But you know, these poor people. It's actually a brilliant job, and it's kind of the route into writing in America. But they sit there all day typing what is being said, and then they collate them into notes that get sent at the end of the day. So you kind of have a reference, and the idea is that you then read the notes before the next day's room. But that's a really tough job. So it really depends. On Sabrina, we did what was called group writing. So for example, I would be assigned an episode. So in the first season, the episode that says written by me is episode 5. But we would all beat out the episode, and then I would say, I'm going to write Sabrina's storyline. Philip, can you write the aunt's storyline? And then you get a kind of all of these scenes coming in from 12 different writers, and then you put it all together, so you have this weird Frankenstein draft, and then it's your job as the lead writer on the episode to polish it all, and then it goes up to the showrunner. In America, you know, the showrunner rewrites pretty much no matter what. Here, that's almost sometimes seen as a failure, that the showrunner has to rewrite you or does a pass, but in America it's just completely normal. But then I've worked on shows that, you know, I did Industry season 2, where you go away and you write your own episode individually in a room, and then it kind of goes back in. But Sabrina was such a big show that it's just quicker to get a script together if you do a group write. Well, one of the key differences when you're pitching in America is you actually pitch. I have a pitch on Thursday. I have 9 pages of A4 written out, and I will verbally pitch that to the studio network producers. If you talked at a British commissioner for 30 minutes non-stop, I think they'd melt. They just wouldn't understand. It's just not what we do. We normally send in a couple of pages and then we follow up with a chat or a phone call or a Zoom or whatever. That's changing. I've sold a show recently to Netflix in the UK, and we went in and did a verbal pitch. But that was like 10, 12 minutes. We were very conscious to keep it short and concise. Whereas in America, they do expect a really kind of very detailed, well thought out pitch. In some ways, it's a good thing because you get an answer very, very quickly. Either they're gonna make it or they're not, and you'll probably know within a week if it's gonna go into development. In the UK, sometimes you can end up sending in something to a network. 3 months go by, you follow up, a few more weeks go, and it can take a long time. So I do like the idea that you get a quick answer, but I'm also a believer that you don't know what you have until you write a script. And I think one of the drawbacks of the pitching system, you can have the best pitch, you can pitch the best show in the world, but can you write it? And until you have that first draft, I don't think for me anyway, I don't know what the show is. Yeah, it's definitely sales in America. It's that pitch is a performance. I have, as I said, the kind of pitch page is laid out, complete with my ad-lib jokes. And everyone around the table knows it's almost like watching a musical that you're just, suspending your disbelief. But it's a pitch, it's a show. And it feels more like a business in America. I mean, obviously the cliche show business, but it does feel more, and especially Hollywood, which is such an industry town, so it does feel more business-like over there. I think it has, and I think it's also really helped with writing, dialogue especially, because having kind of started out much younger as an actor, having to speak a lot of dialogue, one of the things that people said very early on when I was writing is your dialogue's very good. And I think you can learn structure and you can learn technique, but I don't think you can ever really teach someone good dialogue. I think you can either do it or you can't. And I think having a background as an actor as a child really helped me with that. I think the writers that inspire me, Russell T Davies, Sally Wainwright, Jimmy McGovern, Sarah Phelps, all of whom come from continuing drama. But I think, with a Russell show or a Sally show, it's their show. Instantly, there's a Russell T Davies style or a Sally Wainwright style, and they especially those two use comedy to kind of draw you in, and then they can punch you in the gut with drama or something shocking. But they, I think, appreciate that balance of comedy and drama. And Russell's stage directions are the best stage directions you will ever read. And I think they're all on the Writer's Room script library. So I would urge all kind of newer writers to go and read those scripts and just look at those stage directions. The best piece of advice, there are a couple. The first one I think is, it's a marathon, not a sprint. The other one is a kind of practical thing, and it's just write the script. And I do it still to this day. I will write a scene that is so bad that it's like, I want a divorce, or I'm not giving you a divorce, I hate you, I love you, whatever it is, just get it down on the page and then you can go back and rewrite it. And I feel like rewriting is so much easier than writing. And I think in America they call it the vomit draft. And so just get it on the page and then go back and rework it, because that's so much easier than not having anything there.